It says 2 of the bullets above were fired into long tubes filled with cotton. The third, according to the commission, was fired through 2 people, causing 7 separate wounds and shattering 2 large bones. The bullet in the middle, CE 399, is the one purported to have done all the damage. I wasn't expecting the humor in that description of the photo, but here, 2 have been fired through 2 long tubes of cotton and 1. Oh my goodness, you guys. Sometimes people will leave comments and say, quit smiling and laughing. You're talking about something awful. And it's totally true. But as we talk about such a serious subject, we cannot help sometimes but find levity in the absurdity of the Warren Commission findings. And this is one of those moments. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess, Connell, and if you're new, then welcome. I would love to earn your subscription with this video. Today, we are getting into a classic, you guys. This is episode 25 of JFK Circling the Truth. In each episode, we are looking at a different piece of JFK assassination literature and doing our part to circle the truth and investigate and find facts that we can stand reliably on. So that is what this entire series is about. And today is actually episode 25. I'm guessing that there will be at least 40 episodes at this point. But I love that you guys are not just hanging in there with me, but you are actually adding evidence in the comments, engaging with one another in the comments, sharing articles and findings and asking good questions and offering your observations. I love it, love it, love it. So keep that coming. Today is Josiah Thompson's 6 Seconds in Dallas. A man named Jack reached out, I think about 2 weeks ago at this point, and mailed this to me last week. It came in over the weekend, and I realized that actually it came in as another one did, like just in time for the series. So I'm so grateful for supportive listeners who are not just supporting, but generously sharing their resources so that all of us can learn together. And this one, if you don't know, I mean, it looks to be in incredible condition. I love the cover, I have to say. It's like presidential colors, and it has the 4 crosshairs for 4 shots, which is what his theory is. Josiah Thompson is one of the early researchers into the case. He's one of the few that's still alive. He is in his 90s, and my understanding is he lives in California. His friends call him Tink Thompson, and I know that because Robert Groden talks about the influence of Josiah Thompson on him over the years and how much he has learned from Josiah Thompson. So I am looking forward to learning from Josiah Thompson. First, I just want to show you guys, like, this is a beautiful book. I've already shown you the cover, but right inside the cover is just a glorious, gorgeous look at Dealey Plaza. You can see the route of the motorcade there in the dots. You can see each part of it nicely labeled so that you can see the triple underpass where the railroad men stood. You can see the Texas School Book Depository. Back in the background, you can see the railroad building where Lee Bowers stood. You can see the Dow Tex building that we talk about a lot, where we just read about Zapruder's office being in that building. Some people think that there was a shooter in the Dow Tex building. The records building, there was a bullet found there. I believe in the 80s or 90s when they re-roofed the building, they found a bullet casing. And so some people believe there were shots from there, but this is the route that they came down Main Street, turned onto Houston, directly facing that 6th floor window. And of course, no shot was taken then because the shooter needed to wait for there to be the crossfire position between the yellow painted lines near the Umbrella Man right here in Dealey Plaza, where there was a decline down to the triple underpass. And of course, we've all watched from that position right there is where Mr. Zapruder was standing, right in front of this pergola, which now we know is called the Bryan Pergola. But there The witnesses who were here on the grassy knoll said that the shots felt like they were coming from the bushes or from the small garden or up the hill from behind them. Those are the direct words of the eyewitnesses. So, I mean, don't you guys just love that picture? It even has the Hertz sign, so you can tell obviously that it was taken while that was still there. So I just love, I've told you guys, I love a good Dealey Plaza diagram. That one might be my favorite. It's so beautiful. So thank you, Jack, for sharing your book with us. I am so delighted to own it. I can't believe the way you guys have been so generous toward me, and I'm very grateful. Well, the chapter that we're going to look at today is chapter 7. It's called Physical Evidence. Vincent Salandria, a quote from him is given at the top. It says, "My initial feeling was that if this was a simple assassination, as the commission claimed, with one assassin firing 3 shots from one vantage point, the facts would come together very neatly. If there were more than one assassin, the details would not fit." That was from Vincent Salandria in August 1966. So the first topic is called the cartridge cases. 3 6.5 millimeter cartridge cases were found on the 6th floor of the depository shortly after the assassination. Since the evidence presented in the previous chapter indicates that only 2 shots were fired from this location, how do we account for the third or extra cartridge case? On the face of it, the presence of 1, 2, or 3 cartridge cases does not establish that any particular number of shots was fired from a location. More shots could have been fired and some of the cases retrieved. So that's true. Fewer shots could have been fired and an extra case dropped. Also true. So just finding a case doesn't mean. Now, I do want to look back really quickly. He talks about trajectories and firing places, and he gives lots of evidence. I wish I could, I will read all of it, but I wish I could read all of it to you. But he does go through different locations. The chapter before this is called Trajectories and Firing Points. He looks at the stockade fence. He mentions Lee Bowers. He talks about Weitzman and other observers, Sam Holland, who we've talked about. He shows pictures of people coming around at various places from the overpass to the stockade fence, what that looked like. I mean, y'all, I'm just going to show you this photograph because here's one in my Dealey Plaza video that I'm still waiting to bring to you because YouTube has it on hold. Hopefully that won't continue. But here is the corner that is shown there of where the triple underpass came to an end, and he's coming around back toward the parking lot there. But anyway, so there's great photos in here. I mean, I know I'm just going to be able to pour over this book and enjoy it, but he looks at different locations. He looks at the records building, the criminal courts building, the Daltex building, and he looks at the depository. So that's what was in that previous chapter, and that's what he's referring back to, is that he says only 2 shots could have come from the depository. I wonder if that is because of the timing of the rifle. I don't know what his total reasoning is, but that's what argument he has already made by the time we get to this chapter. He says, moreover, when we consider the condition of the rifle and the cartridges when they were discovered, it becomes even harder to draw clear inferences from them. Although the rifle clip can hold 6 rounds and an extra in the chamber, so that makes a total of 7 rounds that could be in a gun. You could have 1 in the chamber and 6 in a clip. Only 4 bullet casings were found, a live round in the chamber, and 3 cartridge cases on the floor. No fingerprints were found on any of the cases or on the rifle clip. In fact, the only print on the rifle was found after disassembly on a portion of the barrel ordinarily covered by the front stock. Whoever fired this rifle curiously loaded it with only 4 rounds when it would hold 6 or 7, and then was careful to remove all fingerprints from it and from the cases fired. These considerations merely point up certain oddities about the condition in which the rifle and cases were found. It is only when we begin examining the 3 cases themselves that our suspicions are aroused. In this examination, Lieutenant J.C. Day of the Dallas Police is a central figure. So here he has some photos. He has the way a clip would look. It says this clip found in the rifle on the 6th floor holds 6 cartridges, but held only 4 on November 22nd. Commission Exhibit 139 is Oswald's rifle found on the 6th floor of the depository. And here it says Lieutenant J.C. Day of the Dallas Police Department carrying the rifle from the depository on the afternoon of the assassination. Interesting. Are you guys comparing the two rifles there as I am? The picture of Oswald's rifle does not appear to me to match the one that Lieutenant Day is carrying. I don't know if I'm seeing that properly or not. 2 and 1. On November 22nd, 1963, Lieutenant Day headed the crime scene search section of the Dallas Police. In company with his assistant, Studebaker, he arrived at the depository about 1:12 p.m. and immediately went to the 6th floor. Learning that some cartridge cases had been found near a southeast corner window, he instructed Studebaker to photograph them from various angles, and then he dusted them for fingerprints. So here is a photo. It says photo of the sniper's nest in the depository taken by the Dallas Police. Note 2 cases next to the wall and a third some distance away. Now, even this, I am realizing, I don't know whether or not this is accurate, but I have read in at least one book that they were lined up very neatly. Well, this is not lined up very neatly to me. This is 2 in a row and 1 off by itself. So they're not all like lined up the way it was described in whatever book that was. I say that because I think we all need to reckon with the tensions in this case, and I don't want to be someone who looks single-mindedly at one particular end that I would like to see be true, and then have confirmation bias that just like the only things I'll listen to are the things in line with that end goal, and I'm not willing to hear anything or see anything other than that. So I want to be someone who sees it all and reckons with all of the facts. This is one of the facts that we need to recognize is there. It says Studebaker's photos showed 2 cases lying next to the window wall and a third some 5 feet away to the northwest. It would be interesting to know which of the 3 cartridges had been thrown so oddly distant from the other 2. Lieutenant Day, however, scooped up all 3 cartridges and placed them in an envelope before they were marked with respect to their locations of discovery. So today, no one has any idea which of the 3 cases was the one lying 5 feet down the wall. This is unfortunate in light of certain disparities between one of the cases and the other 2, and particularly in view of what happened next to the envelope. Detective Sims helped Lieutenant Day pick up the cartridge cases. He then took the envelope containing the cases and turned it over to Captain Will Fritz at police headquarters. When Lieutenant Day was given the envelope later that evening, it contained only 2 cases. The third had been removed by Captain Fritz and was being held by him. Day now marked the 2 cases with his initials and forwarded them to the FBI lab with other evidence. These 2 cases were subsequently given FBI designations C7 and C38 and Commission Exhibit numbers 544 and 545. Both of these cases had marks, quote, identified as having been produced by the chambers of Oswald's rifle. One of them had a, quote, set of marks identified as having been produced by the magazine follower. That means the spring-tensioned lever that presses up the last cartridge in the clip. So a set of marks that had been identified as having been produced by the magazine follower, the spring-tensioned lever that presses up the last cartridge in the clip of Oswald's rifle, while the other showed marks that could have come only from the bolt of Oswald's rifle. Both of these cases showed marks indicating that each had been loaded into a weapon, not necessarily Oswald's, at least twice. Okay, so 2 bullets. They're now both marked by Lieutenant Day. He puts his initials on them and forwards them to the FBI. One of them shows the marks of that lever that moves the cartridge into the rifle. The other one showed marks that could have only come from his bullet. Then both showed marks indicating that they had each been loaded into at least 2 weapons. Very fascinating. The remaining cartridge case differed from the other 2 in a number of respects. So it was kept by Captain Fritz in the early morning hours of November 28th. Its most astonishing characteristic is a sharp dent in its lip of sufficient magnitude to prevent the fitting of a projectile in the opening. In its present condition, it could not have been fired in any rifle on November 22nd. The crucial question arises as to when this dent was incurred. Could it have happened after it was fired, but before it was photographed and retrieved by Lieutenant Day? Perhaps it was dented in striking the wall or the floor during the ejection process. This suggestion must be immediately ruled out. The case is made of rigid brass and would not dent under any such impact. He says, I have thrown hundreds of similar cases against a wall and never succeeded in denting one. I mean, one place my brain goes, just to play devil's advocate, is, did you do that immediately after they have been fired? Is there some sort of heat impact from a fired bullet? I know when I've gone shooting with my Marine that I think a bullet landed like in my back of my shirt or something, and I had to quickly like get it out, and it burns very badly. Like, they're very hot. So I wonder if something like that, like, does heat affect that? Then if it's dense, would it dent? I don't know. But here's a picture of the dent that we're talking about. It's Commission Exhibit 543. You can see that dent there. It says, this dented cartridge case found on the 6th floor of the depository could not, in this condition, have held a projectile on November 22nd. So the question there is, was it dented during the ejection process? Could it have been stepped on? He asks. Two facts work against this possibility. First, the dent itself is sharply defined. It resembles what happens when an empty case is dry loaded in the breech and strikes some sharp metal projection. It does not have the gentler contours that would be expected as the result of contact with a person's shoe. Second, it was discovered and guarded by Sheriff's Officer Luke Mooney, who tells of the care he took in moving in the area and his anxiety that no evidence be disturbed. If anyone stepped on the cartridge, it would have had to have been Mooney. Yet, in May 1967, Mooney assured me in no uncertain terms that neither he nor anyone else stepped on any of the cases before they were picked up by the Dallas police. Thus, it seems extremely unlikely that CE 543 was dented after being ejected from Oswald's rifle. But in its present condition, it could not have been fired in any rifle. Its lip will not receive a projectile. The possibility suggests itself that CE 543 was never fired on November 22nd, but was dropped by one of the assassins, either inadvertently or as a means of throwing the subsequent investigation off the track. Certain other features of CE 543 urge such a conclusion even more strongly. Marks found on the dented case indicate that it had been loaded in and extracted from a weapon at least 3 times. In addition, it had 3 sets of marks on the base that were not found on the others or on any of the numerous test cartridges obtained from Oswald's rifle. So it has extra marks that weren't found on the others, and that whenever there were test cartridges fired, they never showed these marks. A ballistic expert testified that these anomalous marks were possibly caused by dry firing. That is, by inserting the empty cartridge case in the breech while practicing with the rifle. Of all the various marks discovered on this case, only one set links it to Oswald's rifle, and this set was identified as having come from the magazine follower. Yet the magazine follower marks only the last cartridge in the clip, a position that must have been occupied on November 22nd, not by the dented case, but by the live round that was found in the chamber. So what it's saying is, if you have a case that holds however many rifles, this magazine follower only marks the final one in the chamber. So you go through 1, no mark, 2, no mark, 3, no mark. If you have all 4, 5, or 6, only the last one gets the mark from the magazine follower. So the only one that could have had that mark would have been the live round that was still in the chamber and not any of the other bullets that day. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me that whether you have 2 in front of it and 1 live round, or 3 in front of it and 1 live round, only the live round at the end gets the mark from the magazine follower, not the previous 2 or 3 that would have already been ejected. Thus, unlike the other 2 cases that bear marks from the chamber and bolt of Oswald's rifle, the only mark borne by the dented case linking it to Oswald's rifle could not have been incurred on November 22nd. So it's saying if it has a magazine follower mark from having been the last round in the chamber, that couldn't have happened on November 22nd because there was still a live round in the chamber. So it could have happened on a different day, at a different time. It couldn't have happened in the assassination. That makes sense. All of that makes absolute sense to me. Let me know if I didn't explain that properly, but that's how I'm reading it. All this excites our suspicion with respect to CE 543, the dented cartridge case. What is most surprising, perhaps conclusive, about this cartridge case is that it lacks a characteristic impression along the side, exhibited in one form or other by all the other cartridges we know to have been seated in the chamber of Oswald's rifle. I first noticed this characteristic mark while supervising the photographing of the cartridges for Life. I observed on 2 of the cartridge cases an impression on the side in the same relative position on each. I examined the 3rd and saw that no such impression was apparent. The anomaly did not excite my interest until I noticed that the live round found in the chamber of Oswald's rifle exhibited a similar impression in the same place. On the live round, the mark was not as pronounced, perhaps due to the fact that it had not been fired. What he's talking about is this photo right here, and he has little arrows that point to it. I'm just going to leave it here and zoom in so that you can take a moment to examine, but you can see the impression, the little dent that's on the first 2 that were fired from the rifle. And you have the 3rd that shows it a little bit, but that was on the live round that never was fired. This cartridge case lacks any such dent. Very interesting. So as he's observing Life magazine, photographing these cartridges, that's the thing that he notices. The pressure of firing would tend to accentuate any indentation caused by contact with the chamber. I now had 3 cartridge cases, all of which ostensibly were at one time or other in the chamber of Oswald's rifle, and all of which it evidenced a characteristic mark. If this mark was caused by a characteristic of the chamber of Oswald's rifle, then the lack of it on CE 543 might indicate that it had never been fired in Oswald's rifle. One way to test my hypothesis was to examine CE 577, 2 cartridge cases from test rounds fired in Oswald's rifle. Both of these cases displayed the characteristic mark in the same spot. Okay, so the test rounds also displayed that little dent. Thus, the cartridge case that had an extra dent in the lip seemed to lack a mark exhibited by every other case we know to have been in the breech of Oswald's rifle. The combination of these factors, the peculiar treatment accorded CE 543 by the Dallas police, its inexplicably dented lip, the 3 sets of marks on the base absent on the other cases while present on 543, and finally its lack of the characteristic chambering mark, suggests that although 2 of the cartridge cases may have been ejected from Oswald's rifle, the 3rd, CE 543, is most likely an extra, unfired shell, and possibly a deliberate fake. Such a conclusion would mate perfectly with the description of the earlier events laid down, namely that only 2 of the shots fired that day in Dealey Plaza came from the depository. Very interesting. Okay, so you guys, just this level of detail, I have to tell you guys, I am blown away by this book. Like, I want to read every word at this point. I love the way he lays out information. I love the way he explains it. Like I've said to you many times, I am no ballistics expert, but as I read, I feel like I am being informed about ballistics and weaponry and chamber marks and magazine movements and all of the things. He's making it clear even to a layperson. So I want to say, knowing that I myself didn't yet have this book and was not able to afford it, it may be difficult to find, but you may wish to get yourself a copy of this 1967 version, or perhaps any version of 6 Seconds in Dallas. Very, very great information. The other thing I want to say is I hope you guys are following that there are 4 possible chambers. One of them was a live round that was still in the rifle. So that one is not a possibility. Then we have 3 chambers that were found. 2 of them seem to bear characteristics that are very similar to one another and make sense. Each one bears a different, markings, but this third one that was found potentially over by itself, although we don't know the positions. That's right, because they put it into an envelope, and so they're all marked. I do wonder, I was looking like a little more closely, I wonder if there's some sort of modern photography evaluation that could be done to see if you can see any visible dents in that photograph of the three. My guess would be people have looked at that and come away not able to see that, but it would be interesting to see if you can see the dent in the lip on any of those, because that would tell us whether or not it was done before it was found. Well, anyway, so then the next subheading that we get to is Super Bullet, Commission Exhibit 399. Now, they call it Super Bullet. It's called Super Bullet in another reading that we recently did. Later, this one gets called The Magic Bullet, and that's the name that stuck, but it is CE 399. Here's the picture of it. It says, a portion was sliced from the tip of this bullet for FBI spectrographic comparison with the other bullet fragments. The results of this test were never released. I wonder why. But there we have, the tip is damaged not from having deposited lead throughout Kennedy and Connolly and lodging in Conolly's thigh. That's not where this came from. It came from a slice that was done to do FBI spectrographic comparison, and no results were released from that. Deep in the recesses of the National Archives, carefully packed in cotton and enclosed in a small plastic case marked CE 399, rests a copper jacketed 6.5 millimeter bullet. Along its straight sides can be seen the spiral channels of rifling grooves. Although the bullet's tail is somewhat squeezed, its nose and midsection are perfectly preserved. Given such a perfect projectile, experts had no difficulty in matching it to Oswald's rifle, to the exclusion of all other weapons. No piece of physical evidence has excited more controversy than CE 399. Basically, the controversy turns. He was writing this 58 years ago. It's still the case that no bullet has excited more controversy than this one. Basically, the controversy turns on the commission's contention that all the evidence indicated that the bullet found on the governor's stretcher could have caused all his wounds. As succeeding pages will show, all the evidence indicates precisely the opposite. Not only does it appear extremely unlikely that this bullet could have caused all the governor's wounds, but subsequent investigation at Parkland Hospital has disclosed that bullet 399 was most likely found on a stretcher unconnected with the care of either Governor Connolly or President Kennedy. A perfect bullet. According to the commission's single bullet theory, the missile that wounded the governor had first transited the president's neck. Following this transit, it entered the governor's back, making a 1.5 centimeter hole before shattering his fifth rib and blowing out an exit hole 5 centimeters wide. The bullet continued on to smash Connolly's forearm and wrist, splintering the radius bone at its largest point and leaving along its path a trail of bone and metal fragments. This bullet finally embedded itself in the governor's thigh, leaving behind 2 small fragments. Remember that we actually have heard from the physicians that there were actually 5 fragments that were removed from Connolly's wrist, but according to the commission's theory, it left 2 small fragments before falling out on the stretcher. According to the commission, the bullet that accomplished all of this, that shattered 2 bones and caused 7 separate wounds in 2 people, was Commission Exhibit 399. And remember, the little tear at the end wasn't there. So that is quite the super bullet, isn't it? Critics of the report have argued against this conclusion on 2 grounds. First, they point to the minuscule loss of CE 399's substance and the conviction of 2 of the autopsy surgeons that 399 could not have caused the governor's wounds, for the simple reason that more metal was found in his wrist than was missing from 399. Second, they point to 399's undeformed state as evidence that it could not have caused the damage ascribed to it. The second argument is much stronger than the first. FBI firearms expert Robert Frazier weighed CE-399 on the evening of November 22nd and found it to weigh 158.6 grains. He then weighed 3 other 6.5 millimeter bullets chosen at random and found them to weigh 160.85, 161.5, and 161.1 grains. Asked by Assistant Counsel Spector if this meant that there was a weight loss to CE-399, he replied, "There did not necessarily have to be any weight loss to the bullet." A number of metal fragments were left scattered through Connolly's body. 2 small fragments were removed from his wrist and are preserved as CE-842. So these are the 2 that are preserved as evidence. Physicians have testified that 5 fragments were removed, but you can see there is the size of those fragments. It says post-operative x-rays show additional fragments remaining in his wrist. You can see here in the pre-op and post-op that, for example, that piece is still there. X-rays of Governor Connolly's thigh show a bullet fragment remaining in his femur. Robert Groden actually mentioned this the other day, that at the 4 p.m. Press conference that was held about Governor Connolly's condition, that they mentioned the bullet still remaining. And his point was the super bullet, the magic bullet, was already gone. And so you have the full bullet going to Washington at the time that there's still fragments here in the governor's thigh that are being testified to by his physician. Dr. Charles Gregory mentioned a small fragment removed from the thigh wound that has apparently been lost. Oh my goodness. So there's another piece that we haven't even been shown. A small fragment removed from the thigh wound that was lost. You guys, lost! Finally, Dr. George Shires, chief of surgery at Parkland, said that a post-operative chest x-ray showed a small fragment remaining. So we have fragments here, there, and everywhere that are not accounted for by the grains lost in CE-399. I mean, potentially lost. The one expert actually said there did not even necessarily have to be a weight loss to the bullet. So the bullet may not have lost any grains, but certainly once you add up all these various parts, it's more than could have been lost. Given this distribution of bullet fragments through the governor's body, the question arises whether more metal resided in his body than was missing from CE-399. In pursuing this question, Spector asked Lieutenant Colonel Pierre Fink of the Army's Wound Ballistics Section if 399 could have been the bullet that inflicted the wound on Governor Connolly's right wrist. Here's his answer. No, for the reason that there are too many fragments described in the wrist. Earlier, Spector had addressed a similar question to another autopsy surgeon, Commander James J. Humes. And could that missile have made the wound on Governor Connolly's right wrist? Humes. I think that is most unlikely. Going to Exhibit 392, the report from Parkland Hospital, the following sentence referring to the examination of the wound in the wrist is found. Quote, some small bits of metal were encountered at various levels throughout the wound, and these were, wherever they could be identified and picked up, and submitted to the pathology department for identification and examination. End quote. The reason I believe it is most unlikely that this missile could have inflicted either of these wounds, referring also to the president's head wound, is that this missile is basically intact. Its jacket appears to me to be intact, and I do not understand how it could possibly have left fragments in either of these locations. That's very clear. The Army doctor replies that way. The autopsy surgeon replies that way. Spector is still dogged in his pursuit of, well, I'm going to get somebody to say that this bullet could have caused those wounds. Continuing his examination, Spector asked Commander Humes if CE-399 could have caused the governor's thigh wound. Humes replied, I think that, remember, Humes is an autopsy surgeon, Commander James J. Humes. He says, I think that extremely unlikely. The report, again Exhibit 392 from Parkland, tells of an entrance wound on the lower mid-thigh of the governor, and x-rays taken there are described as showing metallic fragments in the bone, which apparently by this report were not removed and are still present in Governor Connolly's thigh. I can't conceive of where they came from. This missile. Dr. Robert Shaw was just as positive in replying to a similar question by Assistant Counsel Spector. I mean, you wonder how Spector could keep going with his questions when he gets this sort of reply. As far as the wounds of the chest are concerned, I feel that this bullet could have inflicted those wounds. But the examination of the wrist, both by x-rays and at the time of surgery, showed some fragments of metal that make it difficult to believe that the same missile could have caused these two wounds. There seems to be more than 3 grains of metal missing as far as in the wrist. Dr. Shaw was then asked by Spector to state his opinion as to whether bullet 399 could have inflicted all the wounds on the governor. His reply could well stand as a summary of medical testimony on CE 399. I feel that there would be some difficulty explaining all of the wounds as being inflicted by bullet Exhibit 399 without causing more in the way of loss of substance to the bullet or deformation of the bullet. This medical testimony is more imposing on first glance than after analysis. Doctors Fink, Hume, and Shaw felt confident that the weight of the fragments found in the governor's body was too much for them to have come from CE 399. But what was the total weight of the metal scattered through the governor's chest, wrist, and thigh? Of the 2 fragments recovered from the governor's wrist, the larger was found to weigh 0.5 grain. The smaller one, plus the flakes of metal remaining in his wrist, might account for a like weight. This gives us a total of about 1 grain for the wrist. What about the chest and thigh fragments? Dr. Shires, who noticed the chest fragment on x-ray, never estimated its weight, but he spoke of it as being the same general size as the fragment embedded in the femur. The weight of this fragment was estimated as a fraction of a grain, maybe a tenth of a grain. If we add to these 2 fragments the flake observed just under the skin in the thigh wound, we have a total weight of perhaps 0.5 grain in the thigh and chest. Adding this to the wrist fragments yields a total weight for all observed fragments of 1.5 grains. Clearly then, Dr. Shaw was mistaken when he testified that, quote, there seems to be more than 3 grains of metal missing in the wrist. The upshot of all this medical testimony with respect to weight loss is inconclusive. About 1.5 grains of metal were found in Governor Connolly's wounds. An unfired projectile like 399 might be expected to weigh about 161 grains. Subtracting the weight of CE 399 from this figure yields a possible weight loss of up to 2.5 grains. Hence, simply from the point of view of total weight, the various fragments in Connolly's body could have come from CE 399. The critics have been wrong in contending that weight loss alone precludes CE 399 from being the bullet that wounded Governor Connolly. So that's interesting. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking he is tearing down the argument that would be to his own benefit. It would be to his benefit to say, well, it looks like there's too much metal here, there, and everywhere to have been from that bullet. But that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is we can't make that argument from weight loss alone. This is an honest man. It's a man who's making his argument and yet is not willing to go further than the evidence says. And I admire that. I think it's really admirable. But he continues. He says, what does preclude such a conclusion is the lack of deformation of the bullet, alluded to by Dr. Shaw. Here is a visual of different bullets, and we're going to hear about the 3 bullets that are not 399, but here is 399. This is the condition of the bullet. Remember that the tip is only harmed because the FBI did a spectrographic analysis on it, but these are 3 other bullets that we are going to hear about, okay? We're told on April 14th, this is 1964, so just 5 months after the assassination, a viewing of the Zapruder film was arranged for various staff members together with the autopsy surgeons and 2 experts from the Army's wound ballistics branch. Assistant counsel wrote a memorandum for the meeting and describes it this way. Since the bullet recovered from the governor's stretcher does not appear to have penetrated a wrist, if he was hit by this, the first bullet, he was probably also hit by the second bullet. So it's saying, since this one does not appear to have penetrated a wrist, he's saying this one does not seem to have touched bone, so there had to be a second bullet that hit the governor. So that's the first analysis. So this is how a meeting a week later, after that initial meeting, came to the conclusion. They said, Doctors Light and Dolce expressed themselves very strongly of the opinion that Connolly had been hit by 2 different bullets, principally on the ground that the bullet recovered from Connolly's stretcher could not have broken his radius without having suffered more distortion. Dr. Olivier, it's actually printed both ways here, so I think that just must be an editing error, but it says Dr. Oliver and then it says Dr. Olivier, but then Dr. Olivier is what's written later. So I'm just going to call him Olivier. Dr. Olivier, another wound ballistics specialist, withheld a conclusion until he has had the opportunity to make tests on animal tissue and bone with the actual rifle. The results of Dr. Olivier's tests were to validate the conclusions of his 2 colleagues. Under his direction, a slug from Oswald's rifle was fired through a cadaver's wrist to simulate the Connolly wrist injury. The nose of the resulting bullet, CE 856, see illustration, was badly smashed. So this is the one that was shot through the wrist of a cadaver. This is what the top of that bullet looked like after touching bone. Another bullet was fired through an anesthetized goat to simulate 66% of the resistance encountered by a bullet transiting the governor's chest. This projectile was badly squeezed along a longitudinal axis. That's CE 853. See illustration. So I'm going to look here. That's CE 853. So it does have the longitudinal smashing. It says, another bullet was fired into a skull. The resulting 2 pieces of bullet are scarcely recognizable. So you can see that is the one skull. So when we look at these bullets, this is CE 399, the magic bullet or the super bullet, that according to the Warren Commission went through Kennedy's neck, Connolly's chest at an angle, through his wrist, creating a shattered wrist of bones and lodging in the governor's thigh. That's this bullet that supposedly did all of those things. But this one was shot into a cadaver's wrist. This one was simulated through an anesthetized goat to simulate the governor's chest. This one went through a skull. So that's what those bullets did. None of these test bullets look anything like CE 399. Only the ballistic comparison rounds, that would be CE 572, resemble it. Yet these rounds were carefully fired into long tubes of cotton waste to prevent any deformation. So it says 2 of the bullets above were fired into long tubes filled with cotton. The third, according to the commission, was fired through 2 people, causing 7 separate wounds and shattering 2 large bones. The bullet in the middle, CE 399, is the one purported to have done all the damage. I wasn't expecting the humor in that description of the photo, but here, 2 have been fired through 2 long tubes of cotton and 1. Oh my goodness, you guys. Sometimes people will leave comments and say, quit smiling and laughing. You're talking about something awful. And it's totally true. But as we talk about such a serious subject, we cannot help sometimes but find levity in the absurdity of the Warren Commission findings. And this is one of those moments where you have to have some real goggles on that are only willing to see one particular answer if you are going to pretend that the Warren Commission findings are accurate. Not only that, but I find that with each look at the evidence, those goggles have to get smaller and smaller. There's fewer and fewer possibilities for how many miracles of evidence you're willing to assert are true. For example, if these bullets were the only things that were saying, I don't know about this, but all of the eyewitnesses, all of the physicians, all of the documentary evidence through photos and videography were all saying it was just 3 bullets. Like everyone in Dealey Plaza said, I for sure didn't hear more than 3. Maybe I just heard 2. I don't know. Like it was not that many. If that's the eyewitness testimony and the physician testimony and the videography testimony and just the bullets look weird, then okay, then we can talk. But when every aspect of the evidence says that doesn't match what the Warren Commission says, oh, the physicians, that doesn't match what, oh, wait, this also doesn't, oh, you mean the ballistics also doesn't match with the Warren Commission. At some point, you have to look at the evidence and say, I'm willing to go wherever the evidence leads. I'm not willing to only hold to what the government says and force all the evidence to turn a different direction toward where the government leads. Instead, I'm going to just say, wherever the evidence leads, that's where I'm headed. And these people who were at this meeting before the Warren Commission was released, they're giving their measured expert opinion. And they are saying it doesn't appear to have come through the wrist. It has to mean that there were 2 different bullets in Connolly. Okay, so that's what they say the evidence says. And this is what the Warren Commission heard, you guys. This is what the Warren Commission heard. None of the test bullets looks anything like CE 399. The results of Dr. Olivier's experiments validated a principle long accepted in wound ballistics and forensic pathology, namely that a high-velocity bullet striking bone is always grossly deformed. I discussed this point with Dr. Cyril Wecht. I was thinking about Dr. Cyril Wecht and how he often brought humor into his grave analysis. He was a man who was serious about the evidence. He also was willing to laugh at the absurdity. And I think if we're going to keep looking at hard things, we have to find levity where we can. We do not have to just be stoics who go around depressed for the rest of our lives as we study these things. We can look at hard things and yet find humor where it's appropriate. That's my contention anyway. After studying the x-rays of Connolly's chest and wrist together with multiple close-up photos of CE 399, Dr. Wecht told me, I do not think that it could have been possible for the bullet shown as CE 399 to have been a bullet that transversed the bodies of both President Kennedy and Governor Connolly. I think it's something which I could not accept, that this bullet, which is not fragmented, not deformed or mutilated, with just a slight defect at the tail, could have inflicted this amount of damage. Particularly the damage I'm talking about to the bony structures, the rib, and the right radius just above the junction of the wrist. I doubt that this bullet could have done it. It just does not seem to fit with any of the cases I've seen of what happens to bullets after they have struck bone. Dr. Wecht's opinion is echoed in the following observation by Dr. Milton Halpern, world-renowned forensic pathologist and chief medical examiner of the city of New York. This bullet wasn't distorted in any way. I cannot accept the premise that this bullet thrashed around in all that bony tissue and lost only 1.4 to 2.4 grains of its original weight. I cannot believe either that this bullet is going to emerge miraculously unscathed, without any deformity, and with its lands and grooves intact. Asked whether he believed Governor Connolly was struck by the second bullet, Dr. Halpern replied, Yes, I definitely do. His testimony is most persuasive. I just can't buy this theory that this beautifully preserved first bullet is going to have power enough to pass all the way through the 7 layers of skin of the 2 men, plus other soft tissue, plus rib and wrist bone, and end up losing no more than 2.4 grains of its weight. In my opinion, the second bullet that wounded Governor Connolly is the one that is missing. Thus, Dr. Wecht and Dr. Halpern, as well as the Commission's own ballistics experts, rejected the hypothesis that CE 399 caused the wounds to Governor Connolly. This same hypothesis was invalidated by the very experiments performed at the Commission's request in order to test it. In light of all this information, to continue to believe that CE 399 wounded Governor Connolly is, in the words of David Lifton, to defy the laws of probability, the laws of physics, and the laws of forensic pathology. Although the argument from weight loss fails, the more critical argument from deformation succeeds. The nearly pristine character of CE-399 precludes its being the bullet that injured the governor. Still, there is one additional piece of evidence that should not be overlooked: where it was found. Now here, he's just going to leave us on a cliffhanger because I don't have time in this episode to keep reading. I actually had wanted to read you guys almost another 20 pages. We have made it through about 13, and that is how many we're going to get through because I just don't have the time to keep reading. I also don't have the voice. I don't know if you can hear, but my voice is slowly fading. Well, he goes through photos of the stretchers. He has a diagram drawn by the man who found the bullet. There's more information. There's a map of the emergency room. This book is loaded with information. So again, if you are interested, the books in this series can always be found in the show notes. Someone asked me recently, Jess, I view your show on a TV. How do I access the show notes? And honestly, I don't know. I only access my own videos through my laptop and through my phone, but I believe it might be the same as my laptop. I think if you click on the title and then you try to scroll down, you'll see the beginnings of a description of my video, and then usually there's 3 dots or something that says show more. And I think if you click there, then you can find the list of books. If you cannot, you can always email me. My email address is JessConnellYT for YouTube. So JessConnellYT@gmail.com. You can always email me there, and I'd be glad to send you the list of books from this series. So you can just send me a request that says, please give me the list of books, and I'd be glad to send those to you. But I want to hear from you about what you observed, about the ballistics, about the bullets fired from Oswald's rifle, about the bullets fired into different bodies and formats to produce different effects. I want to hear from you about the super bullet. I want to hear from you about Josiah Thompson's writing. Wasn't it excellent? He does a great job communicating difficult and complex information in a way that is digestible. I love it. Honestly, can't wait to read this whole book. Let me know if you're going to get the book. I want to read the whole thing. I want to read it right now. Honestly, I've got a list that's way too big. But here we are, there we are. This is where we'll leave this for today. Our next reading is not a reading at all. I told you guys this in a previous episode. I'm actually going to insert a documentary for this purpose. I'm going to watch What the Doctors Saw. It is a documentary. I actually haven't watched it yet. I will watch it between now and when I do the review. But our next episode will actually then be a chatty episode where I will just walk through what I learned and what the highlights were from this documentary, and we'll talk about it. I'll share physician quotes and evidence. I do want to say I've already done one episode on that basic same topic from Robert Grodin's book, JFK Absolute Proof. He has pages and pages and pages of physician quotes direct from their mouths that you can read. So this is also in the show notes. You can always find that information to email and get your signed copy. But he was the first one, and he has told me this, that even in that documentary, some of the physicians' videos that they are showing, Robert said, I was holding the camera. So he was along for a lot of those interviews where they were getting the firsthand information from the physicians in the 90s. Robert Grodin was the one doing the videography with a friend of his to collect that evidence. And so yeah, that's just something worth knowing, I think. But come back for that next time. We will be talking about the physicians and what they saw. I can't wait to get into that. It's always fascinating to hear from those doctors, and they have such crisp minds and such clear awareness of what a body does, especially at Parkland. So come back for that. Can't wait to talk with you about that. Can't wait to hear your comments. I hope you have a great day. Bye.